Hi everybody, and welcome back to Every Stitch Counts. My name is Charlotte. I'm a knitter and a maker who lives in Seattle, Washington with my dog, Lady, who's an Australian Shepherd, and I've been knitting and making things since I was probably 6, but just recently, as of maybe 2020, really got back into knitting hardcore. And that this channel is mostly about all the things that I'm knitting and working on and some of the different creative endeavors that I find myself up to. So if you're interested in that, please like and subscribe the video so you don't miss any of what I get myself up to. In this episode, I wanted to take some time to share with you all just some of the goals that I've set for myself in 2024 in regards to my knitting. I really like goals and I really like goal setting. I'm not a naturally very disciplined person. I find that I get a bit ADHD with life and I like to bounce and do lots of different things, and I am a bit spontaneous, which can be good for trying lots of new things, but it's not very good for consistency and seeing like long-term improvements over the course of a longer period of time and in a specific field or interest. And so I set lots of goals for myself and I try to have reasonable goals that I can see myself meeting, and I try to essentially attach them to physical metrics and things that I can measure for myself, and I can then be able to say, oh, I actually did meet this goal. I've never really done it with knitting, and I thought that that would just be a really beneficial way to think through what are some of the things that I really want to learn this year, what are some things that I want to try, and then how am I going to be stretching myself over this next year in regards to the things that I'm making. I think that I was really motivated to do this because so much of social media is just so interesting and kind of fascinating to me. Even in the knitting community online, I kind of see all of the same things. And I don't mean that in a negative way at all. I just mean that if you see, someone over here doing something and it looks really beautiful, then 10 people over here who watch that video or that reel or that post is going to think, oh, well, maybe I should make that too because all these other people are making the same thing. And it is good for the people who are in that kind of mainstream space, but it doesn't always end up being those mainstream patterns and those things that I guess I would say I see all the time. They're not always things that at the end of the day I would find myself wanting to wear or even necessarily make. And a lot of that comes down to personal preference, but I find that when I'm a bit more, I don't want to say intentional because it's not that deep, honestly. Like, I think I just really wanted to stretch myself this year. I wanted to get out of the mold a little bit. I didn't want to make just what I was seeing on my Instagram. I really wanted to try to branch out and make things that I haven't really seen. I wanted to try and find some designers that I've not really seen a lot of, at least in the Western world of knitting. And I just really wanted to see what I could come up with and what really struck me as something that I wanted to make. So all of that to say, this video is going to be talking about the 5 or 6 goals that I have in regards to my knitting this year. And most of how I'm going to talk to you about that is going to be the patterns that I either want to make or the inspiration of, what I would like to make. I've picked out some patterns that kind of capture what it is that I want to make this year. Things are liable to change. I mean, I have 2 sweaters cast on right now, and originally they were cast on as something else, and then I ripped it out and started again. So I'm going to give myself some grace to, rip things out if it's not working or pivot paths. But I think having a place to start is just really helpful for me. So we're going to get right into it. And my first goal that I have for 2024 is I really want to steek something. I have been seeing In the knit shop that I go to, there's this one steeked sweater that she always has on display, and it's just so pretty. Some of the really traditional Norwegian kofte style cardigans I think are just so beautiful. This one by Sandnes Garn, the Meldal cardigan, is pretty spot on to what I'm talking about. It feels a bit much for my first steeking project to be a cardigan, because I believe you would be cutting down the front and then also the armholes. And for those of you that don't know, steeking is where you're doing an all over colorwork motif and you're creating essentially a channel of stitches that you will intend to cut and then sew down like with a sewing machine so that the stitches and the fabric doesn't all fray apart. It would be very similar to those of you who weave. If you're weaving something, you need to stitch down that woven end, like the edge of your fabric, so that everything doesn't unravel. You're essentially doing that with a garment. So I feel like it sounds a bit scarier than it is. I've seen a lot of people do it on YouTube and online, and I think that when you get the first one done, it would be pretty standard. But pretty much all the patterns that I found are like fingering weight. They are all over color work, and they are all very traditional Norwegian patterns. And I think every pattern that I picked is by Sandnes Garn, which is a Norwegian designer, very popular over there, and they're very well known for their, beautiful designs, but they also have a really wide range of traditional Norwegian kofte style sweaters. The Telemark cardigan, which I think is probably more traditional, it has the heavy motif on the shoulders, and then it's like a speckled kind of all over colorwork motif on the bottom. And then there was one sweater, steeked sweater, that I saw that I thought looked to be a good balance between a traditional like Norwegian style sweater and then something more modern that you would see, I don't know, in a ski shop or something. It just looks really cool. It is also steeking, but it is this all over speckled color work, and then there's a little bit more intense color work on the top. I guess it would be like technically the top yoke and the shoulder portion. And I liked this because I think that it'll be my first steeking project. And so with something like this, like just a slip over style sweater, I would only have to maybe cut the neckline. I don't know how you do the neckline, but I would for sure only have to cut the arms, which just feels more doable than cutting the arms, sewing on the arms, cutting the front for the cardigan, and then also knitting on and sewing down a button band in addition to that, and doing the neckline. That feels like a bit much to me, but we'll see how adventurous I feel. I'm kind of a go big or go home kind of person. So if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna really do it. I have been kind of freaked out by steeking because it feels like such a, don't cut your knitting up, but I've already cut up a lot of my sweaters and put them back together again, so I think I'm not super concerned. I think I'll be okay. And I think it probably is way simpler than it's like made out to be in the world. I think it actually makes a lot of sense and is probably pretty easy. When you've done one, you could probably do like so many. So that's my first goal of 2024. I have an idea of the color palette I want to do. I definitely want to use a toothy, fingering / sport weight, like really rustic woolly wool sweater. So maybe the Jamieson and Smith Spindrift yarn. I also really liked working with the Realm of Phenol yarn for my Telvinen sweater. So something along those lines is definitely what I want to use for that project. The next goal that I have is inspired by the seedling stitch, Athena. She put out a podcast she's done quite a few podcasts on this, but she put out a podcast episode talking all about different Japanese designers and patterns that she really likes, and she has made a lot of her channel is based around, I think, patterns involving Japanese knitting. I was intrigued from the moment I heard her talk about that, because again, it's outside of the mainstream of like what standard Americans or Westerners or Scandinavian people make. Obviously there's going to be traditional patterns and traditional designs within each culture. But just in terms of pattern like relevancy, or maybe what my Instagram feed is going to show me on a day-to-day basis, I had not really been exposed at all to Japanese patterns or Japanese designers. And she spoke about it as somebody who, her native language is Chinese, so she doesn't speak Japanese. She reads it a little bit, I think. She has some exposure to it, more than me. But she basically just said that most Japanese patterns and designers use strictly charts, or mostly charts, to talk about their patterns, and they have a very limited range of sizes, because the assumption is that if you're going to make this pattern and you're, say, bigger or way smaller, that you just do the math and adjust the pattern and make it fit. While that is very, very different than, I would say, the standard Western or European approach to pattern making, I think that it really struck my interest, because I would like to be somebody who isn't inhibited by the way another person has like written a pattern. I would love to be the kind of knitter that can just look at a pattern and think, oh, that doesn't go up to my size, or oh, that's going to be way too big for me. I'll just adjust it, and I'm going to maintain like the integrity of the design, but actually know how to make it fit. And I think that, I'm going to say it, I think that comes down to skill and how comfortable you are just adjusting patterns. Something that I learned from listening to her podcast was just that Asian knitters, Japanese knitters, it's more common there. It's almost expected. And so they're just much more comfortable doing that. And that's something that I would also like to do. So I would like to make something this year from a Japanese pattern, like in Japanese. And I want to see if I could figure out how to read it, how to read the charts, and how to translate it as I go, so that I could, make this pattern that I otherwise wouldn't have access to. So there's a couple patterns that I found. Some of them are just by Japanese designers, and they also have the patterns in English. The first one was this Meraz cardigan. It was just super cute, a really classic, like vintage style looking cardigan with a square-ish collar. I don't know how to pronounce her name, so I'm not gonna try, but I'll put it on the screen. I would rather just put it on the screen than butcher it, so you'll have to forgive me. But she has two patterns that I really liked. One of them is the cardigan, and then the other one is the machi pullover, which is a saddle-shouldered, very boxy, kind of oversized, cozy sweater. I've seen a couple people make this. I just think it's really beautiful. And the reason I picked a couple of her patterns to maybe start with is because I believe you can purchase them in Japanese and English. I could have both the patterns like side by side, and then essentially translate for myself between the two, and that might be a bit easier than just diving straight into a strictly Japanese pattern. The other pattern, there's three other ones that just really stood out to me. One of them is en-devour, and again, I'll put her name on the bottom because I don't want to mispronounce it, but this is just a really pretty slip over. It's pretty simple. It's a brioche slip over, and it just has a rib detail, and then the bottom ribbing is actually a cable design. I just really liked it. I can't remember if I saw this on my Instagram feed or where, but this designer is probably what you could equate to the Woolfolk collection. Like there's the Japanese version of that, and this woman has done designs for that magazine. She has lots of really beautiful designs, but this is one stood out to me the most because it's a little bit smaller, so a little bit easier probably to get through. And the construction of it is very simple. So it wouldn't be terribly complex to figure out, the chart, do the brioche, and then the basic construction of a slip over is going to be pretty much the same no matter how many ways you flip it. So I thought that would be a good pattern to start. And then the last two that I found are truly Japanese patterns. They have no English translation of them. The names of them are in Japanese characters, so I can't say them. I don't know what they are, but they were both published in the Daruma store, which you can follow on Instagram. Again, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe the Daruma store is what we would probably equate to Woolfolk. It's got that same kind of editorial vibe. It's got modern knitwear. and they release magazines and publications, and they have lots of different designers do designs for them. Both of the patterns that I picked are slipovers that have a split hem. One of them is really cool, I think. It's like a very square silhouette, and it is only connected on the side with a tie of some kind, and I just think it is so cool. It's got not cables but a chevron textured pattern all around across the front, minimal shaping, and then you do the ties on the side, and I just thought it was so cool. Again, it's only in Japanese, but I think if I just went all in and I learned how to do Japanese knitting from Japanese only patterns, it would just open up like a whole world of designs that I think are so cool. I don't know what it is, but the Japanese aesthetic when it comes to their knitting, from what I've seen, is just chef's kiss. It's so chic, but also very classic. I feel like there's lots of silhouettes and shapes of clothing in there that's very reminiscent to like the 50s, 60s, and 40s. I'm obsessed with all of that. I don't wear those silhouettes a lot, but I think that they are just so cool, and they're not super common, I feel. And so those are great places to maybe start if you too are interested. That Daruma Store like publication company is great because you can find tons of different designers there, and you can just kind of peruse all the different designers that they have used in the past. The next thing I really want to do in the year 2024 is make a traditional pair of Norwegian knee-high tall socks. I don't know what struck me about this. I thought it would be a really neat like heirloom thing to have, but then also really practical, which I'm all about the practicality. Surprisingly, it was kind of hard to find patterns for very traditional Norwegian socks, specifically ones that go really tall. I'm sure there's lots of really old vintage magazines that I could try to find that would have those patterns. I found one on Ravelry that I liked and would actually be able to like find the actual pattern. It's the Norwegian Stockings to Knit by Terry Shea, and it's all with fingering weight yarn. It's knit in the Ralma yarns. I believe it's a one size pattern. But you can't even purchase the pattern on Ravelry. Like, you have to go to a website and then follow that link somewhere else to get the pattern. So I'm open to suggestions. If any of you have or know where to get traditional knee-high Norwegian sock patterns, let me know. DM me on Instagram or like leave a comment with where you might find those, because it was surprisingly hard to find. Now that I know it's like hard to find and I don't necessarily have it, I want it, obviously. So let me know if you have any suggestions on that. All right, still on the train of socks. This is more about what one of my last two goals is, this next one, but it's like all related. I just want to make a couple pairs of Aran weight like vanilla socks. There are two patterns by Ozetta that I think I'm probably just going to purchase and use. I probably could figure out myself how to do and make a vanilla sock, but honestly, I have a lot of brain power going to other projects and other endeavors this year, and I just can't be bothered to try to figure out how to make a vanilla sock without a pattern. So I'm gonna purchase the Camp Socks by Ozetta, as well as the Comfort Socks, which is essentially the camp sock, but it has a ribbed top on it. And originally these are both designed in the E10 Let Lopi yarn, I believe. They're both designed in Let Lopi, which is a very scratchy, rough Icelandic wool yarn. I don't have that, and I don't think I'm going to purchase it. I have some stashed yarn that I think I'm going to hold double with itself and then just use that. It's not the best sock yarn, obviously. It's like single ply merino and silk. So like not the best, but it's what I have in my stash and I want to use it. And I don't really have a convenient amount of it to make anything else. So I think I'm just going to go that route and make socks with it, holding it double. And that way I'll have some nice socks to wear when I'm out and about. The real goals that are the heavy hitters this year. The first one is I really want to try to self-draft my own sweater. Now, I have some yarn that I want to use specifically for that project. I have maybe 1,600 yards of this thin fiber sheep from Lopez Island yarn. This is their Spy Hop yarn. As you can see, it's a chocolate brown, it's all undyed fiber, and it is speckled and plied together with a silver fiber. So it just gives a really beautiful color effect, speckle. This is DK weight fiber, and for being a like small mill farm produced yarn, I really was drawn to how even the yarn was. It just seemed really high quality, both in the fiber, but then also the processing. I don't remember, I think I bought this when I was in Portland at a festival with my mom. It was one of those things where I bought it, I really love it in the skein, but as soon as I got it home and I started thinking about what I wanted to make with it, I was just kind of uninspired. Like I didn't it's not going to look great with cables because this specific color isn't going to show cables well. I didn't see any like textured sweater patterns that I really loved. The only thing I could think of it really looking good in was like a really kind of just vanilla sweater, like plain crew neck, classic fit, probably something you could equate to like a petite knit pattern. I just didn't want to use this like yarn, which is I feel pretty special yarn, for like just such a plain sweater. I'm like, I could purchase much cheaper fiber and make some of those plainer sweaters, and that's more what I would want to use that for. And so I got it in my head that I want to use this yarn to self-draft my own sweater, my own vanilla sweater. Not necessarily to sell, not necessarily to like make a pattern to sell, because I think frankly there's more than enough like plain vanilla sweaters on the market for people to purchase, but more of just as an exercise for myself of, can I figure out the math? Can I like work through that process? And potentially can I make something maybe that's slightly more unique than some of the sweaters that I've seen? I, for some reason, think that this would do really well with a high turtleneck, and then I don't think I want to do a raglan sweater. I think I really want something with some more structure to it and more shape. So I don't know how I would do this, but possibly doing something seamed along the shoulders so that you can have that nice shoulder seam that just makes garments and tops like look very square. I think this yarn would hold up well to that. And then potentially having it be loose but slightly more fitted to my body. Lots of questions on this. I don't really know. I have some ideas of what I want to try to make with this in that vein of vanilla sweaters, but I'm just not totally sure. Maybe we'll have to make like a mood board or something and post it on my Instagram so that I can keep you all kind of informed. But I want to self-draft my own sweater, and I'd like to use this. Worst case scenario, I just go back to the raglan construction and I go from there. I think it would still look great, and it would still be something I would be really proud of if I was to self-draft that. But aim high. Aim high, and then know your bare minimum that you want to like be at or be slightly better than, and then you won't be disappointed. And so that's kind of what I want to do with this. The last goal that I have set for myself for 2024 is to use up my stash. I think that a lot of people set this goal for themselves, and I, for myself, would like to see some follow through on this, because I bought a lot of yarn in 2022. I bought some yarn in 2023, and I was just looking through, kind of organizing everything I had late last year, and I was like, I have maybe like 8 to 10 garments worth of sweater quantity yarn, different fibers or whatever, that I have just sitting on my shelf, and I'm not doing anything with it, and instead I'm like spending all my time looking at all this other stuff that people are making, and thinking, oh, I gotta buy yarn for that, or oh, I wish I had this specific yarn for that, rather than just looking at what I have and thinking, wow, I have so many things that I could potentially make. And so, probably end November, early December last year, I really did some internal work and wanted to just change my mindset about that, because I think that creativity, at least for me, myself, I found myself to be most creative when you're kind of in a bit of a bind and there's a bit of pressure and there's limitations. At least for myself, that's when I find that I'm the most creative and that I accomplish the most. And so I thought that this would be a really fun way to see and pressurize myself to make stuff with my stash. And I have a lot of cool yarn in my stash, and I just have to be creative about what I'm going to do with it and how I'm going to use it. So the rules that I've given myself for 2024 in terms of like purchasing yarn, I am not going to purchase any yarn that is outside of the goals that I have already talked about, or is not going to help me use the yarn that's in my stash. So an example to clarify, the Steeking project. I have no yarn in my stash that I could use for that project. I'm giving myself the okay to purchase yarn for that specific project. The Japanese one, like the Japanese knitting projects, I might have yarn in here that I could use for that, so hopefully we'll try to use stash for that. If not, though, I still want to accomplish the goal of knitting something from strictly a Japanese pattern, so if I need to, I will purchase yarn for that. Everything else, though, all the other patterns that I've talked about, the socks and all the patterns that I'm about to talk about, will be used with stash yarn, either on its own, or I will purchase yarn to like hold with it to make that, you know, more suitable for the pattern. So those are the limitations that I give myself. I can't just go out here buying yarn willy-nilly. I can't just go out and buy it because it's pretty and I don't know what I'm going to make with it. This is just a goal that I really wanted to set for myself. And I think it is a good practice for all of us, because most knitters I know have an excess of material and maybe less than the number of like finished objects that they wish they had compared to the stash that they have. So some people like having a lot of yarn on hand, no judgment on that. For me personally, it begins to clutter my brain a bit if I have too much. So this is just what works for me. If you want to fill your house with yarn, more power to you. Like, God bless you. Maybe someday we'll get to that point, but right now this is something that I want to do. So let's get into the patterns. The first sweater that I think would really do well with some yarn that I have in my stash is the Cabled Cardigan by Irene Lynn. I saw Whistle and Thread make this pattern and I was obsessed with it from the moment I saw it. I also don't have any cabled cardigans. I think this year is going to be the year of the cardigan. I really want to make cardigans. And I have this 100% alpaca yarn that I got from Maryland Sheep and Wool. It's technically a worsted weight yarn, but it is so fluffy and airy that it's going to be way too drapey. And it's probably not going to have the clarity that I want it to have for this particular sweater. So this is a perfect example of I have like 1,400 yards of this stuff, and I'm just going to purchase something really stiff, really like scratchy for this really drapey, fluffy alpaca to grab onto, and then I'm going to make this cabled cardigan, which is an Aran weight cardigan, and it uses, probably for my size, it would use, I don't know, maybe 1,200 yards of Aran weight yarn. It's done top down. You start at the top collar, and then you knit back and forth for the front of the cable portion because it's not in the round, and then you attach the sleeves and then you knit the sleeves. So perfect construction for stash busting, because you can get the yoke done and then you can do the sleeves, and you can make the sleeves as long or as short as you want, and then you can freely like make the body as short as long or as long as you want. So I'm super excited. I think that this deep you know, chocolatey brown is just going to be so pretty, and I think it's going to be very classy. So I'm super excited about that. The next pattern that I kind of picked out for myself was yet again another cable design, and I'm going to be using yet again another alpaca yarn. I just went kind of crazy on the alpaca in 2022. I was going to festivals for the very first time, and so I was seeing all of this farm, you know, fiber, and I just couldn't resist, I guess. This is from Jester Farm out on the East Coast. I don't even know if they have a website. It was a really old lady selling this stuff, and I just really liked this color. I thought it was really classy. I bought her out. I think she had 8 skeins left, and I bought all of them. So I have like 1,600 yards of this stuff. It's technically marked as a DK, but I think that if I held it with something, I could easily get worsted or Aran weight, which is what I need for this next sweater. The sweater that I thought would look great, and specifically this color, was the Marizio sweater by Joan Ho. It's a drop shoulder construction sweater all over cables, and it has a turtleneck on it as well. I'm not necessarily always super crazy about the drop shoulder. I'm making a drop shoulder sweater right now, and so we'll see how I like it. But this one just looked so, I don't know, chunky cabled sweater classy to me that I just really wanted to make it. I have a couple all over cabled sweaters, but they're both raglan cable design sweaters, and I really like the idea of doing something drop shoulder with cables, because sometimes with the raglans, if you want it to be like a big oversized sweater, inherently the yoke of your sweater is going to be like much larger. And sometimes when you're making big oversized raglan sweaters, it can like bunch up really funny in the armpits because you have that like diagonal raglan line and you have all this extra fabric. And I don't necessarily love that. And so I typically haven't made my cabled sweaters as oversized as I would have liked. But something like this that's drop shoulder, I think it looks better on more people when it's oversized, and it doesn't bunch up in the same way. So we'll see how that goes. But I definitely would have enough yarn, and I would definitely do the same thing as I would with the other cardigan. I would buy, you know, something pretty stiff fingering weight to hold with this, so that it gives it more structure, because while this alpaca yarn is 3-ply, not as fluffy, much ropier, it would still be pretty drapey, which I don't mind, but for something like a big cabled sweater, I want it to have some structure. So I'm gonna buy something to hold double with this and then do that sweater. I also have 4 more skeins of Jill Draper's Kingston yarn. No color listed on these, so this is just Jill Draper's Kingston. It's a tweed yarn. She's a small, they dye their own stuff. I think that's their deal. But I believe they're on the East Coast. I'm currently knitting up the cloud sweater with this in like a mossy green. And this one I've had for a long time. I've had this for more than 2 years at this point, almost 2 years. And it's a tweed, it's got a ton of variation in the color, and I just haven't known what to make with this, but I did find a sweater that I thought would look really good with this. Thought the cables would stand out enough, and most of the sweater isn't going to be in stockinette, so it'll really let the tweed shine. And I found the Perennial sweater by Noor Gahan, not quite sure how to say that, but it is a pieced together sweater. So it is knit flat, 4 separate pieces, and then you seam it all together. It has this really pretty, I don't know, herringbone type cable design on the front and the back. The only thing I don't like about this sweater is in the original pattern, it has like an indent on the front. Like it's not straight. It goes like this. And it's a design choice. In the first picture on the Ravelry page, you can see it like French tucked into this woman's pants, and so maybe that's the original purpose of it. I'm definitely not going to do that. I'm just going to make it straight. I think it'll be more to my liking if I do that. And I just thought this was a really classy looking silhouette, which is really what drew me to it. Again, I like the seam in the shoulder. I don't make a lot of seamed sweaters, but ironically, I love the look of seamed sweaters. I just think that they look so good and they look so sharp and so professional. And so I'm excited to have something in my wardrobe that is with that construction again. I have one other sweater that's like that. And I think that this yarn will be perfect for it. Okay, so the next bit of stash that I have to use is this yarn. So this yarn and actually all the yarn that I'm going to show you from now to the end is from my best friend. She was at an estate sale and this woman was selling her stash of yarn, and my friend like dug through her huge stash and found all of the natural fiber yarns and purchased it for me just as a gift. I have a lot of this stuff. These are all Noro yarns. It's the Noro Myco yarn. It's probably fingering weight or sport. It's pretty light, but it's a single ply, it's wool, and I have it in these 3 colors. I have maybe 950 to 850 yards in each color. I think I have slightly more in this purpley color. I really didn't know what to do with this. I mean, it's single ply. I wasn't super inspired. I wasn't sure what I was going to make. So I think actually what I'm going to do is the vanilla Aran weight socks that I was talking about. I'm just going to take these 2 colors and hold them double with other like colors of themselves. So essentially taking 2 balls of the purple, holding that together, and I think I'm just going to use it to make socks. It's not the best sock yarn, like it's single ply. I don't know how well they'll hold up, but if anything, they'll just be nice, like around the house type socks, and I'm not gonna wear the death out of them. So this will be a nice way to get rid of some of this. This one, this speckled gray one, I actually just really thought this was super pretty. I have, 900 yards of this. And I think what I want to do is, again, I want to purchase another yarn to hold with this double so that I can get a much thicker yarn, potentially like a worsted weight yarn to hold with this. And I really want to make this Carbeth cardigan by Kate Davies Designs. And it's just a really cute little cropped-ish cardigan that has a very vintage style folded double ribbed collar. It's got this cute V-shaped detail on the back, and I just think this is like the most classy little cardigan. It is a bit frustrating because this yarn is like sport and fingering, and I think this pattern calls for a bulky weight yarn. I probably could get away with an Aran weight yarn. I definitely will need to just purchase a worsted weight yarn to hold with this. So I don't know. It could be like, why not just buy actual yarn and use this to make socks? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, I could do that, but I think I'll be kind of tired of making socks by the time I get through these, and I'm gonna want something else, and I just thought that this color would be really pretty with that specific cardigan. So we'll see, but that's the current idea that I have for this one. And then the last 2 that I have are both yarns from Debbie Bliss. I have like 1,400 yards of the Merino DK and then 11-ish hundred yards of the wool and cotton. For the Merino DK, I think that I'm gonna do the Champagne cardigan by Petite Knit. I've been wanting to do that cardigan for a while, and because the yarn that I have is in black, I think that it should be just like a plain stockinette fabric. But I also constantly find myself wishing that I had just a plain black cardigan, like something that looked good with everything that I could put on with anything I'm wearing, and I just don't have one. And I'm not letting myself buy one because I know I have this, so I should just make it. And so I'm not going to think too hard about it. I think I'm going to purchase some silk mohair to hold with this, and I'm just going to make the Champagne cardigan. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it and overthink it. It's a great cardigan pattern. It's very classic, and that's what I'm going to make. The last one I'm also very excited about, the Wool and Cotton by Debbie Bliss. This again is from that estate sale, just like the Merino DK. I have this. It's also in black, and it is a fingering weight yarn. And I am going to make the Tonight top by Lily Kate France. It's a mock neck tank top that is just very cute. It's kind of like a shell almost, like you could wear this with a dress, skirts, pants, anywhere. And her whole thing, Lily Kate, with her designs is knits you can wear out like at night, or date night knits. And so a lot of her designs, I think, just kept so much care to the details. She cares a lot about really fine details, and her patterns, I think, just look phenomenal. I have a couple purchased from her that I would like to make after I get through my stash and some of these other things that I want to do, but I love her designs. I think she is so talented, and her stuff just looks like not homemade at all. I think they are so pretty. So I'm excited to have just a very classic black top in my wardrobe and get through this, because it's been sitting on my desk or on my shelf for like almost 2 years. So happy to finally be getting it used and get through it. That is all she wrote. Surprisingly, not a lot. This video is probably 18 million years long, but I had a lot of stuff I wanted to get through, and if you made it to the end, I'm very excited for you. Hopefully you were inspired in some way, or saw some patterns, or maybe were given some ideas that you didn't have otherwise about what you can do with your knitting and with your stash. I do have a fair bit of stash that is all stuff that I have like 1 or 2 skeins of, and so I'm sure that will be its own project at some point of how I'm gonna start using some of that, either in a big project or just utilizing it in smaller projects. But I'm really excited about the year 2024. I have some stuff cast on the needles. I'm excited to have a plan and just get a bunch of stuff casted on and then just start working through it. Hopefully it won't take me the entire year to get through all of that, but it is a lot of knitting. It is a lot of new stuff that I've never done before, so we'll see how it goes. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have not already, give the thumbs up, and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more. But if not, just keep moving along. Do your thing, live your life. It's all fine. I hope that 2024 is treating you all well, and that you're getting to make lots of things that you enjoy, and that you are finding joy in this new year. So I will see you all next time, and yeah, stay classy. Bye.